Before I go into introductions, I'd just like to have you imagine, I want you to switch on your imagination. So you are a mango farmer in the middle of the DRC. Civil war and disruption and so on is a long forgotten memory. You decide it's such a lovely day today, you're going to take your 5-year-old son and you're going to step outside and you're going to go and inspect your mango trees. You want to see what's going on there. As you step outside, you notice that it's going to be a lovely, fine, sunny day. And yes, it's good for the mangoes. And then you notice your mango trees as they're gently revolving, upside down trees, sideways trees, normal old-fashioned vertical trees in their special containers that contain all the food and fertilizer. And these trees are slowly rotating as they catch maximum sun and maximum use of space, utilization. And you're just absolutely enthralled with the way that juicy golden fruit is just hanging from each tree, almost ready for your robo-pickers to come along and collect the mangoes and take them to the process plant. You're also very pleased to notice that your robo-bees, little drone bees, they're doing their pollination work. You know, after the great beehive crash of the late 20s, all the bees disappeared, and the clever scientists at the CSIR and Innovation Hub and some of the other operations, they came up with these little bee drones to do the pollination work, and everything is just fabulous. And then you think to yourself, I wonder what the market looks like in Paris, because by this evening your mangoes will be processed, they'll be mushed up, and they'll be shipped off to Paris for breakfast tomorrow morning early on some French person's table. And your little son, he's just absolutely enthralled with all of this as well. And he asks you the question, Daddy, tell me more about the process plant. And you tell him, son, this thing is amazing. What we do is we're going to pick the mangoes, and it's going to mush up the mango as is. It's going to first de-skin it. Skins are going to go into one part of the process plant. It's going to mash up that mango. It's going to seal it up all nice, ship it off to Paris, and then the skins will be reunited and they'll be 3D printed, ready to go on their breakfast table in the morning. So 3D printed mangoes. But what's really cool is you've come up with a new process that people are bored with mangoes and want something a bit more. So what you've got is mashy mango. So mashy mango, what it does is it puts a lovely, juicy, frozen glob of ice-cold yogurt in the middle of that 3D printed mango. So tomorrow morning when Monsieur and Madame, when they cut their mango, they'll, after the 3D printers, I've printed the mango, sliced it in half, and there's a lovely, juicy blob of good old-fashioned yogurt right in the middle, and they just tuck into that lovely, fresh DRC mango. And the supply chain, there was always issues with supply chains and logistics getting the mango to the table, and that's all been sorted, and it's just absolutely amazing what Africa has come up with. And that is where we want to go to. So without further ado, switch on your imagination, open your minds, and be prepared. We're going to be taking you through on a little journey. It's the start of a revolution. The revolution has been going some time now, but we're really lighting up the fire. We're getting more cadres to join us in the revolution, more fellow revolutionaries. We're growing the army, we're taking on the world. And we want you to remember Building 22. It's a great name for a company. It's where a lot of ideas, we hope, a lot of seed will be planted here in good old Building 22 for you to go forward into the future. And yes, let's get going. The introduction side, we've really got an awesome panel today. We've got some awesome guest speakers as well. I was going through the, in doing preparation, I was just going through the CVs, and I printed 19 pages of background information. I was like, whoa, I'm way underqualified to be on the same platform. So I'm like, okay, I must get my act together and just dig around a bit. And yeah, I think we've got an awesome panel. Very humble people. I've been speaking to them. Some of them I've met for the first time, and they're just here to do the work. They're here to do the job. They're here to spread the message. They're here to get things going. They can see where we can go. They know the future. The future is good. There's a huge amount of opportunities. And they're part of the revolution. They're here to help us. They're here to take us forward. And it's up to us as normal individuals, citizens, maybe we're representing large corporates or organizations, maybe we're backyard tinkerers or inventors. We just want an outlet for our ideas. And you're more than welcome. Please engage with the panelists in the break afterwards. Do the networking, get the business cards, get out there, get talking, get engaging. Figure out your path, your role to play in the fourth industrial revolution. Right, so I'm hoping that by the end of today you would have had a whole lot of ideas percolating. You've got some fire and some vuma to go forward. You're going to be excited and revved up. You can't wait to get out there and start jotting down ideas and then start the whole process of getting things from an idea to practical commercial reality. Using the support groups, using the organizations, using the knowledge and the intellect that is out there, getting us all together. Let's make this story happen. Alright, so I'm just going to run very briefly through the introductions, and then what we're going to do is we're going to start with our first guest speaker. We're going to go into a panel, have a panel discussion, and then a break, and then another speaker, and then we're just going to end off for the day, and then we're going to do some networking. So without further ado, I would first like to give thanks. The biggest thanks goes out to Johan from Aerosoup. I think Johan, if you can just stand. Johan and Jeff, his trusty counterpart, also at the back there. Aerosoup has done an amazing job. They really are an example. Everything was done voluntarily. They are the example of how South Africans must stand together and get things done. They're an awesome company. When I tell people about the capabilities and capacities of our own homegrown company just down the road that's making heck complicated components for Boeing and Airbus, and we've got the world's largest 3D printer just over the hill. That's amazing. And it just shows in their approach to support, their approach to helping us. It took a lot of work and man hours just to get the websites up and running, to maintain it. That's the whole thing. It doesn't help we start something and there's nobody to maintain it. So please, guys, I ask you, please support Aerosoup with getting onto the website. We've set up a website for Industry 4. We want to get the forums going. We want to get people talking. Please engage. If you pick up something useful, send it through, post it onto the website. Please be engaged. So Johan, thank you. Awesome job. Awesome job. And then the rest of the team, the Capital City Business Chamber. The CCBC has got some interesting, innovative ideas around how a business chamber should be, and I think we can look to the CCBC, to the future of business chambers. How do we engage at a granular level, down to the person on the ground, in his suburb, in his area where he's working? How do we engage? How do we support? And they seriously have done an awesome job of showing us how to engage right through, from the person on the ground to the big corporate, through to the mayor. I think CCBC is about the only business chamber I know where they phone that mayor and he comes to us. So I'm really impressed with the way they get people wrapped around Chris's little finger. So the CCBC, Tshwane's largest business chamber, extremely busy. Got a lot of programs and initiatives to help you, the business person. It's about the networking, it's about the information gathering, the information dissemination, passing out information, getting people together like this, making the things happen, hearing what are the concerns, what are the issues, and trying to do something about that. We know where the issues are, we know where the problems are, and they sort of like serving as a nice voice for us as business to channel our ideas, our problems, our issues, etc. through, and also making money. That's what it's about sometimes at the end of the day. How do I as a business leverage off the networks? Work through the CCBC. So thank you very much, Chris and Tshwane, and the back-end team, Karaba, and them, done a huge job trying to get everybody together. So I'm very, very happy to have them as a support team. Awesome job. Thank you very much. And then Petrus Klopper, he's at the back there somewhere. Where's Petrus? Petrus, there he is. Trusty sidekick. He's one of those small companies making a huge difference from AR2SA. Also in the background, driving, getting the contacts, getting the networks, sending me emails, reminding me of what I'm supposed to be doing, keeping me on track. So thank you very much, Petrus, as well, for all your hard work. It's often the unsung heroes that make revolutions happen. So the foot soldiers, the soldiers, from look at military analogies. So thank you very much, team, for all that you have done. And then moving over to our panelists and keynote speakers. Panelists, thank you so much for making the effort. You heard the call, you came through. Thank you very, very much for making the effort to come through and to say yes without asking too many questions. We're going to leverage off your insights and your experience especially. And what are your thoughts on that? We want to unpick that a bit. So thank you very much. As I said, there's a huge amount of background information. I don't want to be Wikipedia or LinkedIn or anything. You've got the names of the panel speakers. Please go and look into what they've managed to do with their lives, and you see them as an example of what you can do and how you can get involved. So just briefly, we've got Dr. Harry Tshwane from organization Progresses. It's a multi-expert Industry 4 solution platform. Harry coordinates a highly specialized team of Industry 4 related competencies, including best-of-breed IoT, agility software. Collective goal is to support clients in understanding, absorbing, leveraging, and implementing Industry 4 solutions. So, an expert in how do I actually move from point A to point B. And so, Harry, thank you very, very much for telling us a bit more about your key passion, your areas of expertise, what do we need to be looking for, where do we go forward. So Harry's going to be doing the first keynote. And then just quickly through the panels, we've got Professor Oliver Dam. He said I'm not allowed it's very informal, so Oliver, very informal. Oliver's a guru, he's a legend. Please tap into his brain, that's all I can say. He's going to be assisting us. And then we've got Mr. Martin Sanne as well, of the CSIR. He's a director here at CSIR. Also expert, a lot of experience. I'll go into a little bit more detail when we start the panel. And then Mr. Mark van Pelt, he's MD at Pepper & Fuchs, a good solid German business on the instrumentation side, our world. And then he's also on the EU Business Chamber on that board, and then he's also representing the SAIMC. SAIMC, Society for Automation, Instrumentation, Measurement and Control. An awesome organization as well. And then we've got Professor Peter Steyn, Principal and Founder at Cranefield College. Also on cutting edge of education, how do we educate and get ourselves ready for Industry 4? So that's Professor Steyn. Thank you very much. And then Dr. Audrey Verhagen, she's chair lady of the SA Innovation Summit. She's been trying very hard and being very successful at it, at replicating the success in Cape Town. She's one of the key drivers of the innovation happening in Cape Town. That whole ecosystem, that whole environment. I don't know if she had enough of the traffic down there or that big mountain that's in the way, but she's getting things happening up here and doing an awesome job of it. So we thank you as well, Audrey as well. She'll be our last speaker, and then we'll tie off the program at the end. All right. So first off, Dr. Harry Tshwane, you're welcome. Please come up to the front and then lead us off. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. And thanks for being here. It's great having such a big crowd. Before I go into the presentation, there was a recent study done across the world about the advantages or the benefits of 4IR versus the negative sides. How many, raise of hands, do you think 4IR will be a good thing? Okay, that's very good. And how many do you think it's going to be a bad thing? Oh, no, that's very good. So that puts you in line with China and India, whereas the same study proved that in Europe, the French, 46% believed it's going to be good, the rest bad, and Germans 47%. So it's very interesting. So I think today, my key presentation is about mindset. I think we live in the time of the greatest opportunity ever. It's just a question of seeing it and making it happen. And, you know, where machines and people will be one, right? Martin, this is always the topic. We're not going to talk about that. Okay. So I assume today that all of you bought in, that there is no alternative to the fourth industrial revolution. It's going to happen. It's here. The question is, what do we do with it? How do we use it? How do we leverage it? And how do we make it happen? So before I go there, just very briefly about our organization, and I'll do this very briefly, but I think it's important for the presentation today, just that you understand the kind of organizations that are being established. So our organization is a 4-hour platform specializing for our digital transformation. That means that we have a customer-centric products and services around 4 hours. That's not just marketing speak. Essentially, our products evolve depending on the requirements. So if there's a new requirement where robotics and machine learning have to be combined, well, then we try and find the people to do that. We believe that the social capital investment, in other words, the time that we spend in our team is critical. So we don't necessarily need a lot of money. There's no capital as such. All we have is social capital. It's how our team members spend time in getting to understand each other and being able to work with each other. And that's probably the biggest challenge going forward, is you have to spend a lot of time understanding and working together with people. Where in the past you would have simply bought the company and the people would have worked for you and that would have been it. Now, people don't work for you, people work with you. And that's the biggest challenge. And of course, the opportunity. Our logic is that you can't find the expertise in one company. We've got 40 people, on average 20 years experience or more. We've grown from 0 to 40 in 4 months. How would you ever be able to employ 40 people in a traditional organization? And that's just one example, and the same I think applies to you in the future. So in other words, it's not necessarily where you work, but it's who you work for and which expertise you are able to get together in a network. We believe that in the future, things are not just about IT, of course, people, it's people, it's humanists, human sciences, engineers, technology, and others. The problems that we face are not technological, they are people-driven, as I'll show you hopefully in our presentation. We have a common brand. Nobody owns the brand. Well, I guess I do as an organizer, but not really, because it's collectively. Without the team, I'm nothing, so it's very interesting. The participation in our team is totally voluntary. We have a non-disclosure agreement, but at any point in time, people can leave the organization or can leave the network. And as I was explaining, we have 40 experts in a short period of time. And I think the point I want to make there is growth, exponentiality, is not something that is being achieved in the traditional forms. It requires new ways of thinking. What I'm going to take you through today is a very simplified form, I think, of the journey. And there are, in my opinion, 5 steps. There's a step called realize, reframe, reconfigure, re-envision, and reinvent. Okay. Let's start with realize. For those that haven't heard, essentially we have disruption coming. The problem of the disruption are the consumers, it's us. We are weaponized in terms of having networks. We have desires in terms of wanting things cheaper, faster, better, safer, etc. We are the driver of change. We change the organizations and the industries that we engage with, and they in turn change the next, etc., etc. And so there are 3 categories of organizations: those that are already disrupted, those that are changing fast, and those that are beginning to accelerate. It's almost like a law of nature, it cannot be stopped. There's a momentum that's coming, and I think that's the basis of it. It's not debated, it's just there. And the reason is that increasing customer demands, they are switching, cost, service, and range of expansion pressures, privacy, security, ethics, image risk, means that the challenges are just getting significantly more. We have front-end industries, those are facing the brunt of the change as the first wave. Then we have the middle-end industries that's coming, those are manufacturing organizations and others, and I think within the city environment there will be quite a few. Smaller organizations may be less affected, clearly, but I think everybody will. And then finally we have so-called back-end industries, which are mining, process industries, and others. And in South Africa, mining is really disrupted because of cost pressures and others. So what that means is that the rule book that we've all been taught, we've grown up. Unfortunately, the youngsters in the room, they haven't. So they have a clean slate. Thanks for that. But the others amongst us, we've been taught certain things. When we went to school, university, what our parents told us, those rule books will no longer apply. One of them is that, son, what you do is you go for economies of scale and size-driven power. The bigger the company, the better. Let's have a bigger company. Let's buy stuff. In the future, it's about differentiation in terms of cost, speed, and use of data. It's no longer about that. I mean, if you think about Uber as an example, what do? They simply collect data, they connect parties. Do they have assets? Not really. The same from Airbnb and others. So it's really not about size anymore. It's about what you do with what you have. Industries were sharply delineated. Today everything's mixed. Insurance companies are competing against medical aids or becoming medical aids. Banks are going with insurance companies, etc. Lifestyle companies. It's just one big mess in the sense that everybody does everything. You're no longer safe from what you believe to be your old competitor. The new one is just around the corner. And this is probably the most interesting one, is where in the past it was all about what you owned. Right? We have to have assets. The balance sheet was critical. How many factories do we have? How many assets do we have? And so on. You have to own them. It's yours. And that's changing. It's no longer whether it's yours or not, but is, do you have access to them? Can you use them? Can you leverage them? Can you share them? And I think this is one of the key points of the presentation today. As a city, as a society, how are we able to better share what it is we have? Because in the past we couldn't. There were simply no connections. But now with this technology we can share things. And by the way, that is the biggest hope we have for our planet as a whole, is sharing and using the things better and reducing waste. And finally, in the past, value creation was dominated by value chains. So let me explain. So it was basically a car maker had suppliers who supplied components. Then the car maker dominated the relationship with his end customer via the dealers. That was a value chain. That's a chain. Now in the future, this chain will increasingly be broken down. We are talking about networks. Now, as you can imagine, a chain is in two directions. A network has multiple directions, multiple dimensions. And that's really the change that's happening. So whereas in the past I only had a preceding and a post-seeding party, now I have multiple parties from all angles that I need to work with. And I think that's the key message that I'd like to leave with you today. Networks. It's all about networking. How do we build these networks? How do we tangibly build these networks? That's the question that we have to answer. So what is driving this process? And you might say, but we're not really experiencing it. Yes, we see Netflix, and Netflix giving multi-choice a hard time and so on. When is it happening? So ladies and gentlemen, basically what's going to change is that in this current world, in the pre-4R world, individual parties are trying to control the external environment. They are saying, we will give you the car that you want. Ford said, you can buy any car as long as it's black, right? Remember? That's the kind of notion. So I will produce a product, and then I will do marketing to sell the product I have. Okay, so of course I'll listen to the customer, but essentially I just want to push him to use whatever I've got. Now what is changing is that the whole power base is shifting from the supplier to the other side, to people who have demand, us, and the people buying stuff. So we're going from dictating to a new world where the complexity will just build up, ratchet up, and all of a sudden it will explode, and essentially those who are trying to control will no longer be successful. What it requires is that the external environment will dictate to us what happens. The customers will say, I want this element, I want this. Have you thought about combining the two? And you are now forced to deal with all these challenges in a new way and be receptive to what your customers want, and be able to deal and satisfy these requirements. Now, what does that mean from the supply chain? So where in the past, you could do your planning and say, I will sell you X thousand of this type of vehicle. Now the customer may say, I want a combination of mobility. In other words, I want to have a Gautrain ticket with this and a drone to pick me up. You didn't plan that. This is the issue. So in other words, you now need to change the way you operate to be able to be flexible, to have a contract with Gautrain, this, that, etc. And that makes it so difficult. It's so difficult to plan. This is the issue. And that means that companies have to adapt. They have to adapt to the outside environment. As opposed to dictate, they have to adapt. This is the biggest issue. And as you can imagine, adapting is different to dictating. It means that people have to be more flexible. Your employees have to think ahead. Organizations, networks have to be flexible. And that's really the biggest change that we are seeing. Okay. So let's talk about reframe. What does reframe mean? Disruption has been around since humans existed. So when we had, in the 1300s, we had bow and arrow, as you know, then we got gunpowder, and there was one of the major disruptions in warfare, and so on and so on. And nothing's different now. What's different, though, is that the technologies are coming at a rate as never before. Things are being combined, accelerated, but the principle of disruption is very much the same. But what's going to happen here is, if you look at this slide, we have level of competitiveness here and time, and typically what becomes available are new technologies. Right, so in this city environment, all of a sudden there's a new technology like WhatsApp, whatever it may be, and now some of us adapt and adopt these technologies. And then by us adopting these, we are increasing the competitive base. It's those suppliers or those service providers who use the technology invariably improve their competitiveness relative to those who don't. And that means that the competition moves to a higher level. All of a sudden, by having just the old service is no longer good enough. You have to have a network service, you have to use the technology. And invariably, us, the customers, do we ever want to pay more for less? Never, right? So invariably, a decision gets made and people choose the better option, the cheaper option. And that's when shakeout occurs. Those who did not make the jump, those who did not come along, they will fall away. It's as simple as that. And this cycle will continue as long as there are human beings on this earth. It will always be the same. But why do we call it the fourth industrial revolution? Revolution obviously implies it's not an evolution, it's a revolution. Because all of these things are happening all at once in a speed that we haven't. So it is an inflection point. It is not like the 70s or the 80s or the 90s. These things are happening. So the most important thing for me is the mindset. It's the reframing of the mind. So what I pick up when I speak to customers is the sense of negativity, right? So you tell them the story about the disruption. And then they say, well, you know what, competition's getting worse, there are less profits, more firefighting, more control for more risk. No, it's, the only way to do this is have more control, more rules, right? More rigidity, more silos, more this, right? More shareholder value. Forget about the customer. Oh, it's about the shareholder. Let's squeeze a little bit of profit out of the DSTV contract. Let's squeeze the insurance. Let's irritate the customer, but it's fine, we make profit. Well, that's what it does. Less time for customers, of course, we're too busy, right? Then we have a poor future business case. You go to the bank and say, I need to invest. And he looks at the figures and says, no way, no way. With this business model, you're not gonna make it. Then you limit your investments. Guess what? It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy of despair and decline. There's only one way down, right? And that's where many companies are. They're in that downward trajectory. So the biggest challenge for all of you, for all of us in this economy, for the country as a whole, is to actually go out of this negative mindset. We have to go and reframe the mindset that we're in. So in this new world, the upward spiral, the previous restrictions they no longer apply. Size is no longer an issue. Investments are not necessarily an issue. They are outdated. There are new opportunities and market technologies offering partners. You can reach customers anywhere in the world. The problem seems to be the mindset, right? This mindset here. And there are boundless opportunities for those who are willing to take them. So the vision of a future state as a driver for change and improvement. And I think this is the biggest challenge. And then, of course, afterwards, the reconfiguration. Once you've seen it, to make it happen becomes easier. It's this which is a challenge. And if you look into the industries in South Africa, manufacturing is in that mindset. Every year it's just getting less and less. Mining is less and less, etc., etc. And unfortunately, when you go in disruption, there's no smooth disruption. Disruption, by definition, is disruption. How do you make that transition from that phase to the next phase? That's the key thing. It's a mindset change. And how do you get as many people as possible to go and understand the opportunities as early as possible, and avoid the consequences of serious disruption, which is basically getting out of business? That's the challenge we have in South Africa. Because at the end of the day, in 10, 15 years' time, there will be a new industry. But we can lessen the pain. We can, in fact, increase the opportunity if we do that. Of course, if we leave it, we will go down, and then we will rebuild. But how do we do it in a way that it has the best benefit for all of us, as a society and as business? So Einstein said something really profound. He said, we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created. And that is true. If you have a game mindset for a game which was third industrial revolution or second industrial revolution, that is the game set that you think you are going to solve the problem. The problem is more of the same will not solve the problem. This is the issue. You require a new thinking for a new environment. So discarding the second and third industrial revolution paradigms. What does that mean? As I was explaining, I want to repeat them. Second was size matters. Dominate your supply chain. Dominate this, etc., etc. In the fourth, it's not about that. So if you obviously follow the old rules, you're going to get the old results. Old world operating model is irrelevant. New solution thinking is required, and companies need to reframe their desired future state. What does that mean? It may mean that it has to be a smaller organization. It may mean that you have to have an old organization in an old form and a new organization running in parallel. Or you may need to buy a new organization. It doesn't necessarily mean that taking your old one and always taking your old one to a new state. That will also not happen. So it really is about what do I want to achieve as opposed to how will I take my legacy to that future state, which is the issue. And this really requires people to go into themselves, as we say, and think about this and reflect. Okay, so let's reconfigure. So I showed you this video, you saw it when we were, what does that mean? What are those lovely, we call them twinkle stars in the progressives family? The twinkle stars for me are essentially the combination of parties coming together and adding value. That's ultimately it. It's about making connections, like we're doing today. Making connections between different sectors, different stakeholders. So that's really what it's all about. It's all this connectivity and creating something new where two parties come together. And by the way, that is something no AI program can do. Right? These ideas that we have in terms of combining things, that is human nature. That is the stuff we are strong in. And that is, I think, what we need to focus on. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, how is this journey going to work? Typically, there are 3 phases in this journey, which starts with a traditional supply chain, as I was explaining. The second one is there's probably going to be a hybrid digital supply and value chain. And then finally, we're going to have a value network. Let me explain what this one means. So in an organization, which is in distribution, certain elements of the business may be very happy to be in a supply chain environment. It may be very efficient, there may be economies of scale, there may be no need for networks. But others, for example, that engage with customers may need a network, etc., etc. So that really is not everything has to be a network, but really which elements of the business make sense and so on. And that's the hybrid stage that's probably going to happen. And we're already seeing that in certain organizations. So what it means that for all of you, your organization, that have to move across, the first thing is processes and interaction need to move from this to that. The use of technologies. When do I use a drone? Do I use a drone? Do I use artificial intelligence? What do I do? Do I use IoT, etc., etc.? There are disruptive technologies, one a day. Every day there's a new one, right? But which ones are you using? Because, I mean, you could bankrupt your company tomorrow by using the wrong one for the wrong purpose, of course. Innovation, experimentation, that's the big thing. How do you get the people to work together, like what we're doing today? And then finally, access and use of data. And we'll be focusing on that in the latter part of my presentation. It's all about data. So in the city environment, how do we have service providers next to each other? The hairdresser, the butcher, the candlestick maker, in theory. They have 2, 3 offices next to each other, pre-prep. Which data does need to be exchanged? Is there data that needs to be, etc.? Is there any value creation? How do we share that data? What, etc., etc. So how do we use that data in a way that actually adds value and brings the parties together? So this is a depiction of a value network, which means there's a digital core and there's all sorts of processes, and essentially, as you see with the line, it's an any-to-any. That means synchronized planning has a direct link to the supply chain, development has a link to the customer, etc. Now just think about that picture, just think about that complexity, right? A supply chain simply has a node coming to me and a node going away, and possibly another node there. Here it's any-to-any, right? The complexity of all of this, just understand, appreciate what that means, right? It is quite a different world that we have. So that means network organizations, they need to be able to connect, interact and evolve, they have to build relationships, they have to operate in an agile way, they have to leverage data, they have to scale, protect their business and others, they have to improve and they have to innovate. And all of this in a networked environment. Quite a challenge, quite an opportunity. So, I gave a speech recently at the Quantity Surveying Conference, and I just want to explain based on that for your understanding. So, in the construction industry, as you can imagine, there are multiple interactions. From the person drawing up the plan, from the person basically funding a shopping center being built, as an example. Then you have the quantity surveyor. Then you have others. Then you have the building company. Then you have the people, the inspectors, etc., etc. And so it goes on. And then, by the way, the building needs to be maintained. So all of these people have to work together, and in the future, we'll have all these technologies. There will be the robot printer and will be printing the wall. There will be the drone flying around and measuring what's happening, etc., etc. There will be millions of IoT devices on that building site. How do you get all this stuff connected? How do you link it up? Because remember, the quantity surveyor doesn't necessarily have the same goal as the builder. The builder of someone wants to make a plan, and the quantity surveyor says, no, I don't want to stop you making a plan. I want you to stick to the plan. All right? So essentially, the parties have different interests. Yet that IoT device that measures the concrete from drying, at the rate it's drying, is data that both need. Right? They do different things with it, but they need the same data. So in other words, how do you get this data connected and into the right pigeonhole? This is the challenge. How do you do that? And that means, in this case, I mean, you have to find a way to deal with planning, project design, costing, surveying, and you can read them all under facilities management. That's the challenge. And that's just building, right? So in your sectors, wherever you are, whatever sectors you may be, the smaller you are, probably the easier it will be. The more integrated you are with other players, the more challenging it will be to deal with all these other parties, to exchange the data and find a way that you can work together. Once you've done that, though, the opportunities are huge. That's the thing. Okay, so what it means is that the environment requires new 4R capabilities. You have to have a digital experience, digital operations, digital innovation, digital ecosystems. And what one is seeing now is that this need that I've explained to you, of course, people cannot solve that need on their own. How could you? You're working in a network. So you cannot have a network of one. You have to have a network of many. That's the point. So how do you link up? What is the purpose of this collective? So in history, one's talked about commons. I don't know whether you know it. In history, they're basically the workers in the 1300s, they worked together to plow the fields, to harvest, etc. There was a concept of commons. In other words, how did these parties work together? The same principle of the commons is reinvented in this new world, in the digital age. How do people work together to solve these problems? You have an infrastructure provider, somebody that says, you know what, I'm going to give you a platform, and you just link to LinkedIn, you pay me X per month, and I'll sort it out for you. You can use my platform. The other one is a platform organizer, which is what Progressus is. We have a platform, we organize it, people come together, there's no cost. The issue is about working together in terms of competence. A trusted advisor. Okay, so I need somebody to help me with my security needs. I need somebody to help me with these needs, etc. Or the city, as an example, it's a good one. So I need a trusted advisor. I want to be able to invest. I need to have all these infrastructure, these resources to help me. That's in that direction. And then there may be somebody who just says, look, I want to give you a product, which is a cloud solution. You can download whatever software you need, etc. and so on. So, and this is only the beginning. So you're seeing that this commons, this new digital commons, needs new ways of working together. People have to group together, and they have to find ways of doing this. And that's really, I think, what today's meeting is all about, is how do you, us, find a way to go into this age where we are able to work together in some form or manner to do what it is we need to have done. Okay. Is it a combination thereof? Is it one or the other? That's the question. So let's re-envision. So obviously digital transformation needs all of these things, strategy all the way down to data. There's no doubt. But what is most important is that nothing happens without people and organizations. This is the challenge. So in other words, we can do all of these things, but it is you and you and you who want to work together, who would understand why, who would need to, etc. It's all about us. The technologies doesn't run themselves, it's about people. So what we have here is what we call a buy-in curve. You can see here there are different levels of buy-in. There's one person, two people, a group, etc., all the way to an organization. And the question is, which mix of change management do you need to apply? Because more than anything else, it's about people. It's about changing their mindset. They have to see the opportunity. If they don't, it ain't going to happen. How do you do that? And that is the biggest challenge, I think, that you are facing here today. When you go back to your offices, when you go back to your peers, your stakeholders, how do you change them? So typically you'd have a buy-in of an initiator, then you'd have a sponsor, you'd have a decision maker, a shaker. Somebody would need to tolerate this and say, I don't like it, but I'll tolerate it, tell me more. Somebody in a C-suite or a senior position needs to buy in, and eventually the rest of the organization needs to buy in. And then you have the jackpot. In most situations, that does not happen. If you think about your organization, big organizations, you think enterprise requirements planning, all the big software projects, they typically fail. Why? Because that process is not achieved. And that's the biggest challenge we have here. So if we do 4IR, which we have to, there's no doubt, how do we get the people to accept it? How do we get them to buy in? And how do we get them to use the stuff? So what we think is critical is, of course, a change management thing, which is about understanding, believing, contextualizing, feeling, touching, seeing, processing, and internalizing. People need these things to appreciate. It's not just, here's the PowerPoint slide, look up on my website, and you'll believe it. It doesn't work that way. So what we do as progressives, as an example, is we strongly focus on the psychology of this. We say there are 4 kinds of people. There are people who can deal with the future. There are people who have strong emotions about things, a very red quadrant. There are people who like to have a process, and there are people who deal with facts. Now, if you are a person in the red, in other words, you like emotions, and I'll tell you the facts as to why this should be. It just goes like this, it just flows past you, and vice versa. So in other words, it's really a question of how do we deal with this phenomenon of change with different people in different ways. So we think that what is important in your journey is that you need to look into, so people need to understand 4IR and what digital transformation means. What are the options, what are the challenges? If they don't understand that, fundamentally you have a problem. The second thing is people need to appreciate technological and other disruption. They need to be aware that if this is not done, it's about competitiveness. And ultimately, if we're not competitive, we go out of business. It's as simple as that. And which of these technology, what does that disruption mean? They need to appreciate the technology, the enterprise, what it means. How are we going to work in the future? How are we going to cooperate? How are we going to build networks? People need to see and experience the stuff. You know, for me, I was in the States and I saw this fantastic augmented reality and the glasses and the voice activated and so on. And having that set of glasses on your nose was sort of a key moment in terms of really understanding, feeling it and seeing it. So unfortunately, with many of these things, if you just hear about it, it won't work. You need to see them. The business benefits and which technologies to use, and then finally the threats and the risks and how this data is deployed, etc. So what that means is, unfortunately, it's not just a one-size-fits-all type story. It's not just you will go out of business. That may work at some level, but unless I understand what this stuff does and how it works, I will not necessarily have bought it. So we urge you, when you do your change management activities, you have to look at it from different perspectives, and ultimately it's about that person. So to conclude in this section, 4IR is only manageable with flexible committed people. 4IR is only manageable with flexible committed people. Okay. So what that means is that the change management and stuff is not for the sake of getting them there and then saying, well, now you will. Ultimately, you need those people to play their role in this network world. If they're not committed, they will not be able to do their job. It's as simple as that. So just to show you the ecosystem, you'll have value creation here, you'll have a group or a platform, and you'll have a data story where you use data. Now there's the person, so this has to be linked, that has to be linked, the person has to be linked. So in other words, that person, other than in the past, where you said, this is your job description, you will come in at 8:30, you will go for lunch at 12:30, you will come back, you will do this. That no longer works. That person in this new world has to find work, has to look for work, has to react to work. There's no job description which you can ever draw up which will satisfy the complexity of the requirements of that person. This is the challenge. So complexity will be high, there will be no system that is able to plan and prescribe what to do. The initiative to find and create linkages is the new way of working. It's about that person finding stuff, not being told to. And then you need complete buy-in, clarity of role and tools. And they are indispensable for 4IR. It is about the people. Okay, so let's reinvent, almost done. So basically, in this new world, just very briefly, you will have 3 layers. You will have a layer on top, which is the value add layer. You will have legacy interfaces, and you have things. Now, I don't want to confuse you. In your city, this is of relevance. In other words, we might have a meter somewhere, and I'm talking city council type stuff. Right? I mean, there's a light in my street that hasn't worked for 15 years, right? So I have not been able to somehow get that fixed ever. So that street light doesn't work. There are systems in terms of how we contact the city, as an example. There are interfaces, there are value layers, in terms of how do we optimize stuff, how do we train people, how do we do things. So in this new way of working, we will operate without hierarchies and in a dynamic multi-party network. Without hierarchies, is that even possible? How can you work without anybody telling you what to do? That's surely not possible. Frontline takes a decision, not the manager. Nimbleness and speed is the issue. Innovation is by everybody. Offerings are developed by all parties, including the clients. Most offerings actually come from the client. There's a new way of value creation, where there's a new path every time, depending on whatever is required. Machine decision making. Unheard of. The machine takes a decision on your behalf. It's quite simple. Either it's in parameter or out. If it's out of parameter, the machine will decide to switch off, switch on, whatever it does. The basic decisions will be taken by machines. The more complex ones will be taken by us. Digital twinning, this concept of seeing something remotely and believing the data, believing a machine, it's not possible, surely, is going to be a second nature. And then disruptive technology, and then agility, not conformity. In other words, this whole thing about, oh, we've got the big ERP system installed. No, we can't change it. Right? The next update is in 4 years' time, so you have to just live with the process. That's going to change. It's about, okay, it's about me, it's not about the system. So how can all of this be achieved? So, ladies and gentlemen, we need to have a value creation that is reconfigured in terms of new level thinking. And that means, if I asked you, if we stopped at this point in the presentation, and you walked out and you had to brainstorm, you'd probably ask the question, so what does this bloody thing need to do? What does this network need to do? And you say, well, yeah, we need to connect each other, right? Okay. Do we want to transact on the system? Yes. Do we want to exchange data, etc.? And so you'll go and you'll start to figure out what does this thing need to do for you. And this is really what this platform collaboration is all about. So ultimately, you have to find a system that links and connects and secures all of you. Introduce and facilitate. I'm looking for somebody. I'm looking for that party. Who can help? Simplify and set context. How can we exchange data? What do you need from me? Manage the community. Record and transact. And you've all heard about blockchain and all these wonderful things. So blockchain may be a new technology, but a little transaction between the hairdresser and the butcher, or what, hopefully they don't have one, but assuming there was one, that little transaction would probably be a blockchain type transaction, where the cost is relatively small and we don't necessarily need to involve the bank. So these technologies are critical in terms of facilitating the way we work. Provide an ecosystem platform, mitigate risk to build trust, and finally learn and sell the insights. I mean, all the AI stuff and so on. So networks can't be built alone. Costs, risks, and rewards need to be shared. How will you share? Let's assume you go out and you all put down 10,000 Rand and we'll build the first network. How are you going to share that cost with the next group? Because remember, you guys were the first ones, right? You took the risk. Do they have to pay more? Do they have to pay less? Question. This is the issue. They're always, like in life, you'll have first movers. How do first movers work with the rest of the team? That's the challenge. New cooperative models are required. Collective need to define the collaboration. How are you going to work around and say, well, once again, butcher, candlestick maker, etc.? How do you create context and secure flexibility? Because the last thing we want to do is build another SAP or an ERP system. There will only be one way, right? No, you want to have a way where you can work on the basics, but you could differentiate your business and so could you. And how do you find that balance? And then finally, how do you get the funding? Because all of this stuff is about you have to build something, people have to use it, once it's viable it has to grow and expand, but clearly there's a risk. How do you do that? These mechanisms of the commons have to still be developed by people like yourself. So I don't want to take you through all the technology layers, there are quite a few, but all I want to tell you is that for every sector, these requirements, ranging from interfaces, analytics, database, are different. They may have been common at some level, but depending on what you do, of course, you either have more data or less, or you have more things or less. So there is a requirement for these to be configured. And I think this, ladies and gentlemen, is the biggest challenge we have. In the past, we had all the big companies doing this for us, right? They told us, this is the software you're going to buy, this is what you're going to do. And in this new world, it's not going to be that way. Small companies will work next to big ones. Big companies need small companies. So it's no longer as simple as just going and saying, I'll buy something off the shelf. There is input required. And unfortunately, you need to spend social capital and working with people to get these solutions done. So to conclude, ladies and gentlemen, I think there are 3 steps. There's to find a vision and common platform solution. You have to resolve sponsorship, you have to find a platform solution framework, you have to determine the workings, you have to establish change of business requirements, identify areas of possible value add, define business opportunities, and fit the business model clearly. Then there is a need to define platform value creation ecosystem, with how do the parties work together, what is the functionality and so on. And then finally, this has to be configured and tested. Now in this new world, everything is about agility, everything is about minimum viable offering, as you might have heard, and then seeing whether it works. If it doesn't, stop it, change it, adapt it to something new. Not spend billions, but rather test quickly, see whether it works and adapt. Final slide. 4IR allows for unparalleled innovation and growth. The time is right now. Ladies and gentlemen, the other three revolutions were great, but we definitely have the best one on our hands. In this one, we have scalability and reinforcement of digital technology. We have exponential growth in access, data, things, and connections. We have network effect and massive reach to target audience. In South Africa, we have the opportunity to reach almost all our citizens, which we never had by cell phone, etc. It's unbelievable that the social change we can achieve by these instruments. And so-called frictionless entry and optimization, in other words, whether I have one Uber driver more or one less is a question of a few cents. It's not millions of rand every time. So the possibility to scale is just phenomenal. We live in the age of exponentiality and network growth without the restrictions of the past. 4IR is the era of unequal opportunity for those who accept the change. I thank you. May the 4IR be with you.
Thank you very much, Harry. Okay. Whose brains? Who's got the onset of a migraine or a headache? Who's really excited? Who's seeing all the opportunities? Yeah. Who's like, can't wait for this to finish, let me get back to work and start rattling some cages. Thank you so much. That was an awesome foundation for us. It showed us the way forward. Some of the, I was writing down, as you can see, I'm old school. I'm unfortunately one of those who destroys electric equipment. I've got too much energy, so I destroy stuff. So I don't trust tablets and phones and things. They seem to break when I'm holding them. They never work when I ask them to work. That's how I've got one microphone inside here and the other one here in the hand. There was a lot of terminology used, a lot of key terms: networking, adapting, customer-led. And what was great is that we've been given the power. Thank you. You pointed out to us that we've got the power. We can make the change. Networks, and I want to say again, networks, and I'll say again, networks. That is the key. I think that's probably the key word you pointed out. It's probably the most important term, is being the ability to engage. Now, what happens if you're shy, and you don't like talking to people, and you're not the sales and the marketing type person? How do you engage? While it's called internet, WhatsApp, you don't have to engage face-to-face with a humanoid. You can use Facebook and Twitters and so on. So there's even those shy people, there's opportunity for you to engage and make a difference. There's a lot of stuff here. Mindset change. I think that's the biggest problem we're going to be facing going forward, is mindset change. How do we get people as excited as all of us about this, and how do we do that without getting people blocking us? We're already experiencing a bit of a backlash. There's already people at very high levels saying, no, they're just getting hung up on the automation side, job losses and so on, and that's, we can't have that type of conversation. We need to handle that very, very carefully and look at how do we deal with the mindset change. Different perspectives. How do we handle the negativity? New level thinking. Not once did you mention the technologies itself. You didn't go into the AI. You didn't talk about the robots. You didn't talk about the augmented realities, a little bit about goggles and that. What was the key takeaway? It was about what's between our ears. And that's the whole thing. That's the thing that we want to be driving around Industry 4, is it must be people-centric, people first. It's all about you. The technology will follow. It's about what's stuck between our ears. What's the ideas? Okay, so I'm going to give you an idea, commercial idea. We've got 2 commercial ideas for you. I've been holding on to them, but I think it's time to share them. Who loves public toilets? Public toilets, anyone? Who finds them fascinating? Who enjoys visiting them? Nobody. Okay.
Well, I've got a business idea for you. All right, who loves going to a public toilet and when you push that little button to get the soap out, there's no soap? Yeah, anybody love that? Who loves it when you walk in and, you know, especially if you're from Cape Town and that drought situation and the taps leaking? Well, not Cape Town, they don't have water taps anymore. They've got those funny little mist things. You push the tap and mist comes out. Our taps up here, I find taps leaking. Isn't that an issue? Toilet paper, they seem to be quite good on toilet paper. You never find a shortage of the TP, but to dry your hands with, there's always a shortage of things to dry your hands, and it networks like this. Who loves having their hand shook by someone with a wet hand? You know, they've just come from the bathroom. It's like, no towels. Yeah. So, how does Industry 4 solve that problem? Right, so I was thinking on sensor technologies. The sensor listens. It picks up when someone clever here, the sensor technology guys, CSIR, they've got a lovely building 14 at the back there, they're sensor technology experts. What it will do is it will listen for the leaky tap. It will pick up all the noise and it will filter out only for leaky taps. And it will send a message to the facilities manager, who will then be able to deploy a team straight away to go fix the tap, and it will know exactly which tap it is to be fixed. It will pick up when the toilet, when you flush it and it keeps on flushing, that there's something wrong. So it's sensor technologies, IoT devices, Internet of Things, pick up the noises. It will hear, every time someone's pushing the soap, it will pick up that, okay, this guy's banging the soap, okay, there's something wrong, sensor technologies. It will send a message, please come refill. Or it can work out, there could be an algorithm that will work out how much gets dispensed, and it will figure out when it's getting low, so much was dispensed, and then it can hear it, and then send off a message, please come fill me. So that's what we're going to be doing. We need to look at these kind of things. Where are your pain points? Who loves going to a bank? Come on guys, who loves going to a bank? Banks are the best. Who loves queues in banks? Who loves pushing that stupid little button and the little slip pops out? You're number 2,345 and a half. And yeah, and then you see number 5,000 gets dealt with before you, and that gets you a bit irritated because you're in front of him, numerically speaking. So who loves banks? So my stepmom came to visit on the weekend, and I love gathering ideas from what I call the silver blades. My mother is here in the audience, she's a silver blade, and my stepdad, silver blade. They silver all over, but they're sharp inside, the old school guys. And they seem to be embracing 4R or better than our gen. But there's something funny going on here. So the silver blades, they're checking all these things out. So I'm trying to impress my stepmom. I tell her, listen here, banks, we're going to destroy banks. I hate banks. I'm going to just revolutionize the way banking is done. Down with banks. Down with education. I hated school. Down with education. We're going to change everything. And she looks at me and says, no, but I like going to the bank. Because when she goes to the bank, she's in Palabor, a small town, the people know her by name. And when she walks in, they say, hello, Mrs. Taylor, how are you? And come and have a sit. And no, go to the front of the queue and hack off everybody else waiting. And she had an issue, and they told her, no, come after hours, we'll open up specially for you. And then she made a joke, she wants tea and cookies. Then my brain started thinking, hold on, how do we revolutionize banking? There's going to be 30,000 to 40,000 clerical offices that jobs will be lost because of automation. So that's a scary thought. 30 to 40,000 bank tellers in the background are going to jobs gone. So we, just accept that. Or do we, as bankers, think a little bit differently? How do we encourage people to come and sit down in the bank and have a cup of tea and a cookie? Imagine going to your bank and you have a time to network and chit-chat and come up with business ideas and think a bit differently about stuff. And at the same time, there's the banker who can help you with investing in your great idea. Imagine if bankers did that. How cool would it be to go to the bank? So we need to change the bank's name as well. Come up with a cool name for them. All right, so that's just a couple of ideas. That's sort of like, look at your pain points and start thinking, how could this be done better? What was the past of this? How did we get to this point? What's the current situation? And what's the future? And you'll be surprised how many ideas you start coming up. And that's what I love about Industry 4. Thank you, Harry. You have value. You don't have to have a truckload of experience or knowledge or insight. You don't have to have gone overseas and studied in some cool university, MIT and so on. You just have to start unlocking your brain. Use your head. All right, so that's, without further ado, we're going to be going over to the panel. And I'd like to ask my panelists to please come up front. And we're going to just start unpicking the discussion, the introduction of Harry, how he dove into this and start unlocking it. We've got a couple of nice questions to ask. I'd also like you to, those of you that are media platformists, go onto our website, the Industry 4 website, and you can post Q&A questions, and then we'll also chuck them to the front as well. Start thinking about questions. This is a huge opportunity for all of us to really unpick the brains of some of our country's gurus in Industry 4. We've got a nice cross-cut of the sector and industry, background, knowledge, expertise. So please, let's get engaged, let's ask the questions, and without further ado, please come up to the front, my dear panelists.
Yes, so just to a brief introduction, we've already introduced Harry. So, Professor Oliver Dump, kind gentleman out here. Very interesting background. He's with the, he's an associate professor extraordinary in industrial engineering faculty at Stellenbosch University. Testing. Good to go. You hear me? And he's with the Fraunhofer Institute, and the Fraunhofer, you need to pay attention to what they're up to, because they've got an interesting model, and if you can explain a little bit onto that going forward, there's an interesting model here. The founder of Fraunhofer, he actually was an engineer, he was a scientist, he was an entrepreneur. And what a cool combination could that be? Three totally disparate mindsets, but when you start to bring them together, amazing things can happen. And if you go Wikipedia Fraunhofer and look up at what they've managed to achieve with their partnerships, with their networks, and they haven't just restricted to themselves, they've actually engaged with universities and institutes all over the world. So they're a great model of what can be done. They're commercially successful, which is always important. And they're a key driver of R&D, especially into new technologies, but taking it also to commercial. So awesome organization to dig into and find out more and uncover what's going on there. All right, so thanks to Joseph von Fraunhofer, who was our scientist, engineer, entrepreneur. Great example for us to see if we can copy paste. We've got similar organizations here in South Africa. And it's important for us to support these organizations. Support them with this. Get to know the people that are involved. Get the word out that we've got these technologies, these people, this expertise floating around. Let people know, they don't just think of us as rooibos tea and winemakers, that there's actually a lot more to our region. And then, as I said, there was a lot of information about our panelists. I went and dug up on them. A lot of background information. Please go have a look. Dr. Harry, we've already spoken about him. As I said, I'm a paper person. Director Martin Sanner from CSIR. He's been very visionary in collaborating. We came up with this crazy idea. We want to set up an incubator program. We had a very, very long discussion and started to unpack what could happen if we actually started working on the network that Harry was referring to. What would happen if we start getting the bright brains together and just came up with ideas and started turning these ideas, taking them, supporting them, growing the idea into commercial reality through structured programs, entrepreneurial programs, getting that support. An organization like CSIR is built for that. It's there to support your idea and get you going. So Martin is the Executive Director, CSIR Materials Science and Manufacturing. Afterwards, please make an appointment to go and have a look at what they're busy with. There's some really, really cool stuff in Building 14. Right, and then CSIR, by the way, it's the largest research and development organization in Africa and accounts for about 10% of the entire African R&D budget. It's got a staff of approximately 3,000 technical and scientific researchers working in multidisciplinary teams. For someone like me that's a serial networker, I couldn't help myself. I got my first foot in the door through Martin. And I started uncovering all the stuff that's going on around here, some of the other buildings. And consequently, I met the crazy robotics guy. He's got hair all over the place. And he wants to replace all work with robots. And I was the only person in the audience who cheered because he said then we could have like 7-day weeks where we just relax and the robots do all the work. So yeah, I like him. He's very disruptive. We've got an awesome energy division. There's the photovoltaic center. They work with the lasers. We've got some amazing laser beams and things going on over the hill. Some awesome stuff happening here. Martin is one of the key role players within CSIR, so please engage afterwards. Their main areas of research: built environment, biosciences, defense, peace, safety, security, laser tech, nanotechnologies. I've actually visited the person that's running nanotechnologies, so that's very small particles. A lot of useful business opportunities out of nanotech. Modeling, digital science, mining innovation. We've engaged with the Mandela Mining Precinct. CSIR is closely engaged with them around what's the future of mining. One of the key areas where we're going to be putting humanoids away from the danger areas and getting the robots to do the dirty work. Yeah, so that's Director Martin. Mr. Mark van Pelt at the end. MD Peppel and Fuchs. Peppel and Fuchs, good German, solid German company, been around for a very long time. Instrumentation, our world that we're engaged with, our company and Peppel and Fuchs, SIMC, Society for Automation Instrumentation, Measurement and Control. We're the people that make things happen in a process. We keep control, we measure things, and we do that through instrumentation and automated processes. So if you're wondering how do you get your can of Coke, or how does your bottle get to where it is safely on the table, there's a process there. Something had to happen to make sure that that looks the same day after day after day, and that it tastes the same day after day after day. Those of you who like beer, you obviously don't want your castle tasting like Black Label, and you're very careful about that. Those that like wine or Coca-Cola, for instance, you want it to taste the same every time you open it. McDonald's, you don't want McDonald's tasting anything else other than McDonald's. So there's a process involved there. Our world is very exciting because it's starting to come to the forefront regarding importance amongst the engineering communities. And with automation and so on, it's starting to play a key role. Data, Harry mentioned it a lot. We need data, we need to understand what's going on. And so we're basically the networkers of instruments and factories. That's what I would call the instrumentation side. And Mark as well plays a key role in driving Industry 4. He's heavily engaged in Industry 4 back in Germany, getting inputs from that side and getting the ball rolling back here in Africa, and especially in Southern Africa. He plays a key role on the EU board, so with Business Chamber, EU Business Chamber, important role there. And then also with the IIG Instrumentation Interest Group. So a strong technical, deep technical instrumentation, and it's starting to grow in importance. So please have a chat to Mark afterwards to understand that world, and then also the role that the EU is playing, key role that they're playing in driving Industry 4. And then I've got Professor Peter Steyn. He's the founder of Cranefield College. Wow, when I went up to your side, so I was like, okay, there's some cool stuff here, because I hated teachers. I hated the education. I didn't do very well. And I was like, no, the school system needs to change. I found it totally irrelevant. And the school, I think they're still busy with Industry 1 and 2. And as a practical example, I mean, how many of your kids have been taught at school how to handle cybersecurity on a WhatsApp, on a phone? Why are we still teaching our kids to write handwritten letters when I don't know, when last has anybody written a handwritten letter? Anybody? Yeah, you guys at school. so there's something wrong here. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, I don't know, there's something missing. Education is a crucial, it's very close to my heart. We need to totally relook at the way education has been done. And I think your organisation is on the forefront of that. They're really looking at how do you upskill today for tomorrow's career. So a lot of background. Our panel are really, I think if we can give our panel a hand for being here, thank you very much. And thank you, yes, for getting out there, building up the expertise, building up the knowledge, and then coming to share it with us. I posted some questions prior to yourselves to see how do we unpack Industry 4 practically speaking. What does it mean for those of us that want to explore this as a business opportunity? What do we need to be doing? Where do we go to from here? How do we build on those networks? I've got some ideas around that, but I'd like to pick your brains on how do we practically get this revolution going, and how do we keep it sustainable? How do we keep it going? What do we need to be doing? So first off, Industry 4, you gave us a great overview. But in a sentence, what would you say? What would you say? Industry 4, the key thing that you would like us to leave with from here today, Industry 4.
Well, for me, there are 3 stages. There's digitization, digitalization, right? And then there's digital transformation, which is how we react. And I think the key challenge for South Africa is actually the first one, digitization, which means creating from analog to digital, right? Anything that ultimately the moment it's digital, you can do stuff with it. And the digitalization is using it well. And that's really where we go from Industry 2/3 to 4. And I think the moment, as I said, it's in a network, and we have the right mindset, we can use it. Is that short enough?
That's short enough, thank you. Okay.
So this is always challenging following Harry, because he says everything up front. I think certainly networks are important, but in words of one syllable, I think there are 2 dimensions, and I think Harry alluded to it. The one is, what does Industry 4 mean within your organization, and what does it mean for your for the stakeholders and customers and so on that you interact with outside of your organization. So I would say yes, absolutely, digitization and digitalization, and yes, there's a difference, is something that can be explored within the organization. I need to shout a little bit. No? Still very. It is something you can explore within your organization that doesn't have to cost a fortune, and we have some really good case studies in Africa where this has happened. So that's very good. Try this one. And secondly, of course, the mindset that Harry alluded to in terms of network, the network thinking collaboration. This is very difficult. We can talk a little bit about that going forward. That's a big challenge.
Shall I give it a go? I hope this mic works better. So, let me start somewhere else. Let's differentiate between Industry 4.0 and the 4th Industrial Revolution. And, the terms are bandied about quite radically. Industry 4.0 is very much focused on how do I standardize different production techniques, how do I digitalize and then standardize what I'm doing. And that's really the origin of Industry 4.0, and it actually is spelled with an IE and comes from Germany. It's grown, it's now called Industry 4.0 with a Y, and the whole of Europe has embraced it, and the world has taken, and especially the World Economic Forum has taken up the topic, 4th Industrial Revolution. And the 4th Industrial Revolution is really talking about digital everything. How are our lives actually changing due to the impact of digitalization? And under that you have to think about future of production, and we're talking a little bit about future of production today. But production can be anything. I can produce and manufacture software. I can manufacture a service, okay, or a service provision. I can manufacture an experience. So where do I draw the line between manufacturing and production? Producing something new, creating something new. So those are the topics really very broadly where one has to differentiate between the industry side and society side, okay? So if I take that bigger picture, what is happening? We are going to a world of digital everything. Okay? We are going to a world where we will have no more petrol cars, we will have no more problems with energy, energy will become virtually free. We're going to a world where we will not have water problems. We will not have climate problems. Okay? The technologies behind that have been invented. We don't need to invent anything new there. What we need to do is we need to implement it. Okay? We need to reduce the cost of implementation and the way we implement it. So how do I get the cost of energy down? And what is driving it down? So new technologies, new materials, new ways of manufacturing things are driving the cost of energy down. And we have to throw a few things overboard at the time, and that's what Terry was talking about with disruption. Okay, so if I go from that, and I say my cost of energy has become free, then my water supply issues have been solved as well. If my water supply issues have been solved, then my food problems have been solved. Because if I have abundant water, I can grow abundant food. Okay? So again, if I have my cost of energy coming down, the technologies to drive energy down, I then have the technologies to fix my water supply problems, I have the technologies to fix my agricultural problems, and I have the technologies to fix my food production. Okay, so that's really what it's about at the end of the day. And those are the grand societal problems that the fourth industrial revolution is tackling. So that's as a kickoff.
Thanks. I'll also start with the World Economic Forum. And because they've clearly stated, we all know it, that no, it's basically four elements are going to be affected by all this. And first of all is customer expectations. Right? That's the first one. And Harry referred to that in his approach. Then there is product enhancement. That's another further element that is going to be seriously affected. Product enhancement. And it's like product, as you have said, product, service, but there is a further component. It's also process. It's product, service, and process enhancement. And this is where all the technologies and the disruptive technologies are going to be mostly in the actual processes. Not only manufacturing processes, but also normal operational processes as well. Okay? And then there is collaborative innovation. That's the networks that Harry's been speaking about. Creating these virtual networks of partners and getting collaborative partners to join you in the initiatives that you do. And that is quite a challenge. And the fourth one is organizational forms. And organizational forms are actually influenced by the three aforementioned ones. Now, the effect of that is going to be massive, massive, folks. Our organizations will have to change. In order to get all these things right, we heard from the presentation earlier that forget about prescriptive strategy. It's no longer, it doesn't work. Right? Emergent strategy is the world. You've got to be flexible. You've got to be agile all the way. And we're not going to get that mindset that you spoke about. We're not going to get that change, Harry, if we do not get improved, enhanced leadership also at the top of organizations. That is transformational leadership, because we're going to have to transform organizations away from the hierarchies and the silos that they are operating in today. Because things are going cross-functional, folks. It's going cross-functional. And you need that transformational leadership. Also, your general management is going to change completely. Today, things are going to happen, even your supply chains are going cross-functional, which means that you will have to utilize program management, which is an offshoot of project management, right? We're still going to need project management a lot. And to hook all these virtual networks up we're going to need to program manage all these virtual partners that we're going to get in the networks. And it is a massive transformation and change that it's bringing. So folks, we have the key enabling technologies. Yes, they're wonderful. I did my PhD on algorithms, right? And so I'm very used to that. I know how they work and all that. Key enabling technologies are fantastic. And yes, they're going to bring the change. But the mindset, that's where the real change is. You're going to be successful in terms of how you change the mindset in the organization and in the ecosystem as a whole, which is at play here. More about this later.
Shall I use this mic or is this one working?
Yes.
Yes.
Switch on in your pocket.
You switched it on?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. As a Belgian national living in South Africa since 2014, enjoying the country, its nice food and wines, I think for me the fourth industrial revolution is about how can I reduce my 50 plus working hours to 20 or 30 working hours a week. How can we avoid going to the Woolies for shopping? And how can I spend more time enjoying this beautiful country, the ecosystem, and the nice food and the wines? Because at the end of the day, if we talk about mindset, and we heard a lot about toolkits and means to get there, but at the end of the day, that is what we are looking at. The fourth industrial revolution will result in the fact that the social environment of a country or a society is going to change quite extensively. It will give you more time to enjoy the things that you like to do, and you need to spend less time on those things that you don't like to do. And that is for me a very simple statement on what the fourth industrial revolution is about.
Very short. Excellent. On the stage here, we've got gentlemen who have been involved in large corporates, IBM, Siemens, so on, Decra, Daimler-Benz, well-known big corporates. Some of our clients, like with Martin, they're dealing with mining houses, big process plants, industries, factories, and also down to the granular level, building up networks of individuals. And that's the problem that we pick up, is that we tend to look at the big organization, big business is going to take over the small business, but we forget that big business is populated by you and me, small people, doing things together. So I just want to unpack a little bit around that. Oliver, you were involved with Stainless Steel, the Stainless Steel Association. It's sort of like an export council. Now I'm also with an export council. It's bringing those businesses together. The steel industry in South Africa, it's in a very bad state at the moment. If they had embraced automation or Industry 4, I mean, Industry 4 has been around a while, the technologies in that. If they had embraced automation back in the day, would we be looking at a different scenario at the moment at the steel industry? Do you think it would have changed?
To be honest, I think that is a difficult question, because I think the steel industry's problems, particularly in South Africa, have very little to do with automation and things like this. But maybe on another topic, bringing companies together, in which we talk about platforms, and I do believe within the fourth industrial revolution we are moving towards platform economies, as it were, driven by networks. And my colleague here also mentioned the cross-functionality. I mean, we have access to data and information now from all sorts of different and apparently unrelated sectors. I mean, for instance, let's say if you run a Pick and Pay or something, I mean, perhaps you should be paying a lot of attention to the weather forecast and also the soccer schedules and things like that, and start optimizing your product offerings on that basis. This is not something that normally leaps to mind. But more importantly, within sectors, we talk in South Africa a lot about clustering and things like this. And I think the challenge we find is that companies are often very willing to talk to each other around the table, around the concept. And it is all very happiness and agreement until business arrives on the table, a project or something, and then it tends to fall apart. So this issue of trust, or this issue also of a mindset that Harry was talking about, where you have a platform or a mechanism, let's say, within which companies can in fact interact, and interact in a way where they remain, where they keep control over their intellectual property, for example, which we call data sovereignty as opposed to data security. This is a big challenge, and not just in South Africa, incidentally. In Germany it's the same thing. I mean, we have, in Germany, much of the economy is driven by the so-called Mittelstand. So in other words, these are sometimes quite large companies, typically family-owned. On the positive side, they have quite a long time horizon in terms of their planning, because they typically want to leave a legacy sort of thing, so they don't operate normally like the Americans do, from quarter to quarter. But on the other hand, it also means that they tend to be quite insular, and to get them out of that is a challenge. And it's the same here. So this sort of networking platforms, I think, is really important.
On the networking platforms, like you've just alluded to, it's a problem that we pick up as well. I've got my idea. I shared 2 ideas with you. How do I protect my idea? Where do I go to next? I've got this great idea. I don't know who you are, but you're part of a trustworthy, credible organization. Take us through that step a little bit, Martin. How do we, I've got this idea, how do I engage with you? What's the practical next steps? Just practical, what do we do?
So let me talk about what we've done. So we've created a platform for the discussion around exponentiality. So, you know, when you talk about disruption, change, and so on, we see an acceleration. So it's going beyond the point where one person or one company can handle this. You need that network. So how do you get that network going? You come together in a room, and you do what we call a sprint process. And you, as part of the sprint process, you try and identify what is the ambition, what is the goal of that group of people. And it could be anything. It could be develop a new product, provide a new service, you know, start using a new material, or introduce a new methodology in a process. Okay, and you think about that. But as you're leading up to that, you set your long-term vision. And you say, where do I want to be in 10, 20 years? And you create that picture in everybody's minds. And you come back from there, you backcast from there. You say, what would need to happen in between? Let's say we're looking 10 years into the future. What would have to happen in 7 years? What would have to happen in 3 years? What would have to happen next year? And what would we have to do right now? Okay, and the interesting thing is, people perceive barriers, and typically technological barriers, to be the biggest issue in achieving that goal. And what we do is we identify those perceived barriers, and then we say, okay, come, let's go downstairs, or let's go into the nano center, let's go across to biosciences, and we'll show you that technologically, that is not a problem anymore. What you're perceiving as being a barrier is not the problem, okay? Because the technology already exists, okay? It's about implementing it. It's about getting that team together, getting that group going, that ecosystem going, because it's beyond one person, one company, okay? So how do I network to get that bigger picture going, okay? Be it, how do I drive an aerospace industry? How do I create a new water industry? How do I change from existing forms of energy supplies to renewable energies? What do I have to do? What has to be in place? And you know, we talked about it earlier on. It starts with education. It then goes on to the process of innovation. Then goes on, you need an industrial partner, so it's an industrialization process. You need funding. You need a regulatory environment, okay? So all of these factors have to come together, and that's when we talk about a platform, how do you orchestrate that? How do you get that going? And then just one last comment to that, and I don't want to dominate the floor. The other part is that if we take a look at digitalization, what is a digital platform? Okay, so what do I need to digitalize? And we talk about the end-to-end digital process. So from idea, from requirements definition, all the way through to my service mechanisms, where I use virtual and augmented reality, the complete value chain becomes digital. And that was what Harry was referring to as digital twinning. I create a digital twin of everything I plan to do. And I simulate it first. So we have perceived barriers in process, I simulate it digitally, and then I start implementing it. So there's many ways of actually taking away the fear of change by getting into a room and having this bigger picture discussion.
Excellent, thank you. We're coming up with some terms here. We've got digital. Okay, first of all, we need to decide what are we going to call this revolution, because we Industry 4, Industry 4.0, digital. I don't know who came up with digital. That's the tongue twist. Digitalization, digital industrial revolution, .4. But we pick up on some of these key terms. We might have a misconception around it. So I'd just like to just very briefly volunteer just to explain the difference. Well, what is digital? And the difference between digitalization and digitization. Just briefly, just so we're all on the same page.
So I did a study recently for a German development agency, and that was the very first question: what the hell do we call this animal? Because as Martin pointed out, it's 4.0, but in a South African context, it's interesting. Industry 4.0 has a certain flavor which may be negative in the sense that people conceive it as being a European concept, which by definition is non-Chinese, non-American, etc. So I say there are 4 dimensions of. The first dimension is the time frame. Clearly we're on the 4th industrial revolution, that's the first one. Then the second one is the distinction between digitalization, and then digital transformation. So that's the second dimension. And clearly we are in digitalization, and digital transformation is a response to the aforementioned changes. And then the third one is the application. So you will hear a term which is Industry 4.0, but the Chinese have an equivalent term which is manufactured in China, 2025, right? And the Americans have advanced manufacturing, something similar. So that is a politically tainted term, in my opinion. Then you have smart. People talk about smart minds, smart whatever, and smart is really digitalization in a specific sector. You'd agree with that? And I think that's probably it. And then there's another dimension, in my view, which is the digital transformation. Sorry, the disruptive technologies. The disruptive technologies influence all of those other 3 perspectives. So in a nutshell, what we call digital transformation is the response to the change, and that change is either 4th industrial revolution, Industry 4.0, smart, etc. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to assist all of us with digital transformation, responding to that change. I hope that makes sense.
Yes, thank you.
If I may add something to that, the South African government also gave that a definition in the meantime, and that is called DIR, or Digital Industrial Revolution. And if you read carefully the IPAP made by the DTI, and you can download that document on their website, in the chapter talking about the whole subject, they say DIR, or also known Industry 4.0. In that context, we talk about IIoT, Industrial Internet of Things, or Industry 4.0 in an industrial context, meaning that you add to the whole thing your cyber physical systems on an industrial level. Now, if you bring it one step higher, and that is then IoT, Internet of Things, it is an Internet of Things, it is an Internet of data, of people, of whatever, and the key factor, the backbone in the whole thing is the Internet. Now, guess what? In South Africa, sometimes it's a challenging thing to get decent Internet, but that is the backbone we are looking at, and that makes that data exchange and that digitization or digitalization that people are talking about possible. So the big one is IoT. Under there you have the industrial version, Industrial Internet of Things, or Industry 4.0, and that is your application in a more manufacturing, in a mining context that we are talking about.
Yeah, can I just add to that, seeing as you were talking about the framework from a government point of view, we as CSIR are going to host the technological platform, which is then supported as part of the framework by the various government departments, like TST, DTI, Department of Education, etc. And what is important to note is that, you know, like it was mentioned, we talk about DIR or FIR. So DIR is the digital industry revolution, and the FIR is the fourth industrial revolution. And those two terms you will come across all over South Africa now. The trend is a little bit more to FIR, okay? And there's a parliamentary paper which we've written, which is freely available to all of you. Just give me your email address and I'll send it to you, where it is spelled out how the framework is going to work and how it's suggested that the various government departments work together. And that hopefully will feed into funding for bigger picture projects. So if we talk about bigger picture research projects, for example. So that's the background.
So we mustn't forget that we also speak of the first industrial revolution, the second industrial revolution, and the third industrial revolution. So collectively, I think the fourth industrial revolution will work the best. If you think of the first industrial revolution, that was the steam engine, right? And just an argument here about job losses, etc. Now, if that were true, that key enabling technologies bring job losses, then they should never have invented the steam engine. Think about that. The fourth industrial revolution also, folks, as I said, remember the key enabling technologies play a major role. But the success will be determined by leadership, management, and governance in the fourth industrial revolution, that mindset.
So ladies and gentlemen, as you know, we have formed progresses, and what I'd like to share with you, just very briefly, are some of the learnings, because you may go to some of the learnings yourself. So I think the journey that we've gone through with Johan and Jeff and others and team over the last 6 months or so has been, clearly the biggest challenge is, I think, for somebody to initiate the process. Right? There has to be energy, and one party has to, at least initially, spend disproportionate amount of time and energy to get the others involved. Right? Ultimately, somebody has to take the initiative and say, this is the vision, this is what we're going to do. And what you'll find then is when let's say the butchers come together and the candlestick makers, just stay with that analogy, the problem comes in that if you go from a philosophy of abundance versus one of restriction, it makes it easier because you say, the more I have other team members in my group, the more we can do. Hence, the broader we are, etc., and the more we can deal with these challenges. But that requires a certain mindset change, because typically we go from a restrictive mindset. We say, the moment I add another person, he or she will take work away from me. That's sort of the basic thing. And I think what is important in that process is the learning to say that the acknowledgement that you cannot do it all yourself. You as an organization, you as an individual, you need others. And then, so once that click has happened, well, then you'll go to the next stage. So what is the collective thing that we're doing? So we have a brand, we have a value proposition. And then that's a tick, and that's a distinct click. And then the next stage that I've experienced in my quest with the team is now it gets to business, right? So I am an industrial engineer, you are this, whatever. Yeah? So now, what you're going to do, how does it affect me, and how am I going to make sure that you're not taking anything away from me, and how do I own it? Because the problem in the commons in history is that if nobody owns it, it gets neglected. So you have to find a way where, despite people having some commonality, somebody has to take responsibility, ownership for a certain portion thereof within the collective environment. So the way we are doing it is we are developing products where specific custodians, like Aerosud, for example, Octine, they are the custodian of a product. I'm the custodian of another product, etc., etc. And essentially the teams form products, the products are harmonized, and there is a party or parties necessary to combine them. But unless you have that ownership of the sub-elements owning and driving their own, then there has to be constant energy to get the process going, and then it will fail. So it's ultimately, it's a key thing about how do you share this vision, that people take ownership, that they see the collective, and the moment they start working together, I think they see the benefits, and then they will expand. And then ultimately it will be, in our case it's relatively easy. We have certain overlaps, but we are not full competitors. So if I had somebody who did exactly the same as me, then I'd always be, oh, hang on. But we've chosen the team in such a way that we are complementary. I think where it will get interesting is the moment you have multiple parties doing the same thing, then people might start getting cagey, unless there's so much work where they realize, well, hang on, I need somebody else as well with a different skill set. So I think for me, it's been fascinating. What I enjoy about the process is the kinship and the team and the people and exploring this jointly. And I think you should not underestimate, it's not just about business, it's about sharing and learning. And the people I learn from the most are the psychologists in our team, because those are typically disciplines we as engineers are not often exposed to. So I think that learning has been key. So I urge you to go through that process because it's fascinating and it's a highly enriching process.
I'd just like to add something to that. And you can see this is where leadership comes in, right? That psychology, those dimensions of the psychological climate, right? What do good leaders do, right? First of all, they build trust. Secondly, they give support, and that's all needed here, right? They also encourage innovation and creativity, is what we need here. We need collaborative innovation, right? They also need cohesion. That's teamwork, right? That's another dimension of a psychological climate. Right? Teamwork is extremely important because you're going to team up with your partners in virtual networks, right? It's extremely important that you get leadership support for that, right? Then, also, as we heard from the previous presentation, you also need autonomy, because this is not like a hierarchical thing that all the decisions are taken at the top. People are given autonomy within these networks. They make the decisions themselves. That is it. So you have to have a transformational leader that encourages, right, the autonomy. And then you've got to be fair as well. Be fair to everyone. Right? And again, it's a leadership issue. And you have to give people recognition. And finally, don't put too much pressure on your people. Right? Let them enjoy, shall I say, the ride or the experience. Right? Let them enjoy it. Right? Leadership is extremely important here, folks. Very, very important. And that's what we teach at Cranfield.
Can I make a concrete offer? So I invite everybody here to join us here at CSIR. We'll find the venue. We'll invite Harry and the rest of the panelists. And we'll have a concrete conversation. We'll talk the processes. We'll talk how to get from idea to a valuable product. We'll talk business cases. We'll talk technology. And that's maybe what I can offer the most of, is that we can show you the new stuff. Okay, we can show you the latest in nanotechnology. We can show you the latest in biosciences. Okay, and as part of that, and I think this is a key part of the offering, is we've created a product lifecycle management center of technology, where we've taken the world-class software available for the digitalization process, and we brought it together in one room. So you can see the digital twin in action. You can see going from requirements definition, design in your CAD systems, manufacturing system simulations, smart machines, how they are implemented, additive manufacturing, 3D manufacturing, so going straight from your CAD design into a 3D manufacturing scenario, what it means for materials and material choices, to the whole manufacturing simulation itself, to, let's say, the service scenario where you've taken your CAD diagrams and you're actually changing that into virtual augmented reality for a service technician to service that product that you invented. And we can demonstrate it all in that one session, right here.
I also applaud that. I can also tell you that Cranfield College is a partner of Lens Living Lab. It's a European Union organization which is led by Professor Brane Semlich, who's formerly from the University of Maribor, and an absolute expert on what we are talking about here. He was also the chair of our management board at the International Project Management Association, on the research management board on which I served for 6 or 7 years. I'm going to invite him to come and join this session. He will make a massive contribution also. Yeah. And Lens Living Lab is in fact an innovation hub creator.
What we've got here is a prime example of volunteerism and working together. I mean, we're seeing it here on the stage, so thank you very much for the offers. And we obviously encourage all of you as well, please come take part. Everybody is absolutely welcome. No idea is too crazy to bring forth. And that's what I want us to achieve today. We're putting together ingredients. We want to bring this together now. We want to start bringing this, start making sense of this. I've got this idea. What do I do with this idea? So just very quickly, if I've got this idea, I'm going to bring it through now. Mark, if you can just elaborate briefly on the impact of Industry 4 on my small business, and what should I be doing? Should I be sitting back and let it happen to me, or should I actively understand my small business now? We're going to go granular, small business, and then if we can just bounce over to you, Oliver. Fraunhofer seems to have found the success of these public-private partnerships, these collaborative organizations, the science, the engineering, the entrepreneurship. If you can just, we want an example that we can strive towards. It's been successful in Germany and elsewhere. Are you seeing that same success here? The trends, the technologies going forward, manufacturing and so on, are you seeing that? Is there hope at the end of the tunnel? Are we seeing that happening? So Mark, if you can just briefly, small business impact, and Industry 4, what does that mean? And then if we can go over to yourself, Oliver. Thank you.
Well, I think to start with, if we look to the success factors in Europe and in Germany in particular, then as already mentioned by Oliver earlier on, it is the small and middle-sized companies that are the basis of the success. Today in Germany, more than 90% of the GDP is generated by small and medium-sized companies, and 2/3 of the employment are taking place in those small and medium-sized companies. So that brings me to the point that in South Africa, to start with, there is a structural problem, not having too much small and medium-sized enterprises as such. A lot of the industry, a lot of the development in this country is perhaps a negative word, but let's use it in any case, dominated by large industries. And they provide a lot of employment. Do not misunderstand me, that's a good thing. But I think the core of the success of this country to gain its competitiveness again on a global basis is to have more dynamics on the small and medium-sized company level. Now, for those companies that are existing today, they are challenging, obviously, a lot of interesting tasks. They also need to restructure, rethink, reinvent, as we saw in the earlier presentation. I think that was the best way to put things forward. But they also have a strength, and already existing, and I will come to the new ones in a second. The already existing ones have also the advantage that they are small, and by being small you can be vigilant, you can be creative, you can be fast in what you are doing, and that gives you opportunities to compete against the so-called mass production companies. And as we were just saying also, the big ones need the small ones, and the small ones need the big ones. It works in both directions. And therefore, if you are sitting in a small and medium-sized company, and let me put things also in the right context here, and again that was mentioned by Oliver, I work for a German company called Pepper & Fuchs. We are defined as a medium-sized company in Germany with 6,000 employees and 600 million euros of turnover. Now, you need to translate that obviously to a South African context where, as far as I know, I don't know the figures by heart, your definition sits on another level.
So that's about half of our gross domestic production.
Okay, so that already is an indication. But it means that, that these companies need to reinvent themselves in the way that they can do more customization, that flexibility, and like we heard also in the previous presentation, the voice of the customer. What is the customer need here? How do I get it done, and how do I get it done fast and smart? And the one goes with the other, of course. So there is a lot of possibilities there for growth for small and medium-sized companies. And then what the new ones concerns, let me start with the statement, 70% of the jobs of tomorrow still need to be invented. Where do the new small and medium-sized company, where do they need to attack that is on that level in those new jobs, those new innovative things? There are a few stumbling blocks there, however. You can have a very smart idea like Mark was saying, but how do you materialize that? What is your knowledge on business? Where do you get guidance on making it happen? Where do you get the capital available to make it happen? Venture capital. My understanding, living only for 4 years in South Africa, is that a typical South African bank, for whatever reason, has an aversion against venture capital. There are for sure private initiatives, and I think the speaker after this session might tackle that topic as well. But at the end of the day, you can have a smart idea, but materializing it by getting business leadership guidance, getting funding, and funding is not only need to come from the private sector, but what is government doing? Is government providing subsidies, capital available for new innovative ideas? And yes, there are in some domains, DTI, DST is already taking initiatives in certain domains, and Martin is probably better positioned to talk about that. But I think it is still on a very modest level. If I see that in Germany, for instance, the last couple of years, 475 million euros were invested in incubators, in startup companies, in all those small initiatives that eventually could lead to big things. Look to your classical Airbnb, look to your Uber driving. These things, or even Windows, they started small, but they became big. Now the future is, as we heard also this morning, not necessarily about big. It is about being smart, it's about being really dynamic, about being fast-moving in the direction of what the market and what the customers are requiring. So there are challenges, but there are surely, to my opinion, more opportunities than challenging things for small and medium-sized companies.
May I add something to that? Now, there's an old saying, the fastest, standing still is the fastest way of going backwards. Think about that, and that's very, very true. And I just want to add again from our experience with Lens Living Lab, now with the partner creation in the virtual network, what do? You first look for partners closest to you, because that's going to work out the cheapest for you, right? Then you will move to the region. If you can't find them there, then you move to international, right? So in other words, you stimulate. And very often, it's not only stimulating existing small and medium-sized enterprises, but it is creating new ones, folks, and that's what we need in South Africa. We've got this massive unemployment. We mustn't forget the other dimension of small and medium-sized enterprises. They are also responsible for plus minus 70% of all new job creations in the world annually, right? It's not large businesses. So you can see, by going virtual, that we're going to have a massive injection in work creation. And what is our biggest problem? Except, of course, for economic growth at the moment. This will boost economic growth as well, right? It is job creation, because our unemployment is rising, and we speak about the fourth industrial revolution. For us, the revolution will mean something totally different if we don't stop this trend. And you know what I mean.
If I may add something to that, if you talk about employment and small and medium-sized companies, and the statement made in the very beginning by Mark, it's going to cost jobs. We don't need to go there. Job losses all over the place. That is absolutely wrong. That is scaring off people, because the facts are that the two countries in the world with the lowest unemployment rate, and I'm talking about less than 4%, that's something different about 35 to 38, whatever percent you have in South Africa. People try to juggle around with these numbers as well. The two countries with the lowest unemployment rate have the highest automation rate. So automation is not per definition going to cost jobs. It's going to create new job opportunities. Those two countries I was talking about are Germany and Japan. They have the lowest unemployment rate and the highest rate of automation per capita. Think about that.
Okay, I think I've forgotten the question, but I think you wanted to know a little bit about how Fraunhofer does it. So perhaps just one sentence quickly about Fraunhofer, because you might not know what Fraunhofer is. The Fraunhofer Gesellschaft is the largest applied research and development organization in Europe. So we have about 25,000 people with 72 institutes and quite a wide international activity. So we have subsidiaries in Canada, and North America, and South America, and China, and Japan, Korea, and so on. And we're also represented here at this point. So Fraunhofer has many activities, particularly around technologies, processes, policy inputs to government, and so on, that relate to Industry 4 or the Fourth Industrial Revolution. But what the organization typically does is it has a model whereby at least 60% of its income, in fact 70% of its income, needs to come from the private sector and from competitive contracts. So we don't have a very large base funding from government. Of course, as Mark alluded to, the framework conditions in Germany are different to here. There's a much stronger, I think, structure of smaller and medium enterprises. There's also, of course, the realization that it's a high-cost country, so therefore, take the other analogy, I think even those organizations typically understand that they have to keep running in order to stand still. And so there's a greater willingness to adopt new innovations or to adopt technologies and so on in order to drive forward. I think what is important from a 4IR point of view also is that there should be this kind of support structure, and I mean, Martin mentioned the center that you have here at CSIR. I think that's a good example. In Germany, we have 10 4.0 competence centers specifically targeted at small and medium enterprises all around the country. And some of them are run by Fraunhofer, others are run by universities, others are run even by industry. And the intention there really is to provide an environment whereby companies can go in order to get information, in order to get inspiration, which is often important, and sometimes to test out some ideas. And so this is also, I think, something which in South Africa could work quite well. We have the technology stations, of course, at universities, which is perhaps a little bit analogous. So there is some support, but I think one can do more in terms of a particularly focused kind of effort. In terms of, you asked, I think, is there hope? I think absolutely. The unemployment issue is difficult because one has to look at the educational level of people, and this is a key challenge, I think, in the immediate future, is how to bring as many people of those along, as it were. But we have to also understand that without competitive companies, there wouldn't be any jobs anyway. So, I mean, it's not a question of do we do it or not. I mean, we have no choice. It happens. Yeah. It's like a tsunami. You can stand in front of the tsunami and say, go away, but it's not going to care. There are good examples in South Africa of companies and even sectors that have begun to embrace this and have actually quietly, without talking about it, done a lot. I mean, there are some farming enterprises, for example, that are highly advanced in the use of satellites and drones and GPS-enabled tractors, for example, to optimize plowing and things like this. We don't know about this, but people are doing it. In the Cape, there is sort of a mini Silicon Valley. I think there's also kind of a magic mix there, where there's lots of very high-tech, small companies, very high-tech, and very open towards the world. This is another point I think I'd like to maybe disagree a little bit with my colleague from Cranfield, is that you don't always necessarily need to look in your immediate environment for partners also. Even small companies, an outward-looking view, I think, is extremely important, and look at what's going on in the rest of the world. Find partners even there, and there are people locally that can help you with that. Because that's also where you get inspiration from and so on. If you only always look at the same people that we look at here, what did Einstein say? We need to have different thinking. We can't just also use always the same people. So I'd like to encourage a more outward-looking view beyond our borders and into our region also and internationally.
I just want to comment, there is too much despondency in the room, all right, ladies and gentlemen. I think that if I'm just looking at the faces here, I almost get the sense that, you went through the curve and, you said that fine, and now you heard us here, and now you're worried it's really that difficult, but it's not. So let me just tell you, so there are software solutions out there, Internet of Things software, and there's, for example, ThingWorks and Siemens, etc. You could go tomorrow, you could link things together, you could create a business within a week. Right? So my son went for training, within 5 days he knew the system, he could do it. So I think that's not the problem. What you have to solve is the licensing problem, is still an old school licensing problem. In other words, if you did that, you'd probably pay 500,000 Rand for a solution like that per year, and that's just too expensive per year for one. What you have to find is how do you get the software players or the companies to provide something that you can do and is affordable to you. If you club together, that cost would go down. And I think we're just seeing a phase where, at the moment, you have access to these tools, and you can add a thing at a few Rand, per year. All of a sudden, you'll see explosion of opportunities. The IoT, we've only got 1% of all the things that we can do with IoT covered. 99% still to come. Can you imagine all the opportunities for business when you link these things up and come up with clever ideas? And you don't need a PhD to do that, surely. So please smile, it's not that bad. I think the opportunities are great, okay?
Yeah, we need to start wrapping up this. This is so complex, it's so cool. I've just had a genius idea now. I want to see the old people, the grey hair, the silver hairs. You need to link with your youth. You guys in front, you know how to switch on things and do app creation and so on. You need to speak to the old bullies there and the old tunnies and get the ideas out of their heads and turn it into actual product. Okay, I'm looking at you two. Yeah, that's your job. The response to the future of South Africa is on your shoulders. Sam, I'll get to you. What we're going to do is we're going to, I'm just going to run through the panel one last time. What I want from you all now is your passion project. What do you want to leave us with, or just a little bit of a, what's your passion? What do you want us to get involved with? and then what we're going to do is we're going to go over to Audrey with her presentation, and then we're going to break for tea. Unless you promise,
I'll be short.
we're going to break now.
Promise.
Okay, please do not run away. You come back from the break, then Audrey's, then that gives us a lot of...
Let's do 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
Okay, let's wrap up now.
Yeah, okay. All right, so let's wrap up now. Passion project or something, one key thing you want to leave us with, very, very short.
We're involved with a summer school project for electricians trained by the German Development Agency. What we're trying to do is to try and instill 4IR in their world. It's a 1-week immersion where we have case studies, psychologists, Internet of Things, all wrapped into one program. And what we hope to learn is how do you make this happen for people on the ground? How do you immerse and change people in the most effective way possible for them to see, feel, and understand? That's my passion project at the moment.
Okay, I'd like to just leave one thought, and that is that it's time and think in South Africa that industry actually is heard and that we actually take action. I think this is the important thing, and I think Harry put it on the point as well. You can do things, just start. Start with something, and we will try and put together a kind of an industry platform, as it were, where industry players can actually share what is happening as we speak. And get support and support each other and so on. I think get involved, I think, is the message.
Yeah, so my passion project is the 4th Industrial Revolution. But to bring it down, just to repeat what I mentioned earlier on, we have created the space for anybody from the public space, any company, any private individual, to come and see what is possible. Okay, and that is our passion project. So we want to show it to you. We can show you how it's done, what needs to be done. And by the way, to talk about those licenses, the PLM Center of Technology was designed together with the DTI, and we provide about 500 million rand worth of software for anybody to access for a small fee, because free is never good. Okay, people don't appreciate when something's free. So there's a small fee associated to it, but it's a small fraction of what you'd pay if you had to procure that software yourselves. So I sincerely encourage you, contact us and we'll take you through a process.
Our passion is to bring proper transformation and change to organizations so that they could better understand the leadership required, the type of organization, the type of management, like the cross-functionality, the program management. And we're not doing it only for South Africa, because everything we do is we practice what we preach. We utilize the best technologies in the world. So all our lectures are streamed all over the world. Right? You can attend our classes online all over the world. We run it from the auditorium, but our passion is to change, to transform, to get organizations to understand that if they do not transform away from the old bureaucratic practices to the new learning organization where you have knowledge management going, that is our passion. If that is not done, we could never succeed with the 4th Industrial Revolution.
My passion is the African continent, and South Africa in particular, and the fact that this country has the potential, has the knowledge, has the means to become in the driving seat, to sit in the driving seat, to be the technology hub of the African continent, because it's not about global competition. The biggest market for South Africa is sitting around the corner called Africa. And the 2 projects, one perhaps that I'm wearing today, as an EU board member, EU Chamber board member, I'm involved in the EU South African Dialogue Facility. Long story short, in the 2nd week of December, representatives from the private and public sector, both from the South African as well as from the European side, will sit together and do an experience and knowledge exchange, helping, assisting in applying the fourth industrial revolution, applying policies into South Africa based on experiences we have in Europe, but executing them in a South African way. So that is my one project. The other project is the society I'm involved in, the SAIMC, the Society for Automation, Instrumentation, Measurement and Control. In that society, I have the honor to be the lead on the Industry 4.0 working group, and working very closely together with our CEO sitting in the back of the room. We are going to invest quite strongly in education, because there is one key factor that this country is lacking today, and that is education. It is something that is called the CCBC New Technologies Initiative Program. This technology is failing for the moment. The NCIMBI New Technologies Initiative Program is an initiative taken by government and also supported by us as a society, where we will introduce from a technology point of view also new training modules or training models, I should say. Yesterday and today you go for a bachelor and an honors and so on, so you have your classical way to get educated. Tomorrow that will be totally different. Tomorrow an employer needs modularity, an employer needs to have a smart approach on which person can I best fit to that job, and those new approaches will be materialized in that NCIMBI New Technologies Initiative Program. There is a long story behind that. The gentleman sitting in the back, Johan Martens, can give you more details about that, but that's the other passion that I'm involved in.
Thank you.
And by the way, the train has left the station, and South Africa better be on the train, or we are no longer we will no longer be in the station.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much for that roundup. I think, as you can see, it's very, very complex. We need a lot of thinking, a lot of thought to absorb what's been going on. We've got some nice offers. I really, really like to thank the panel. Thank you very, very much. I know there's not enough time. There's so much that we could dig into. What we are going to be doing, drilling down into granularity, is seeing how can we get it down to the street. One of the ideas we have is engaging with the different libraries in the different areas, Mamelodi, Shoshambuves, Atteridgevilles, Alderaines, all the different libraries, Lordim, etc. Start there in the community, get similar forums like this with the local clever people, get the people together, and from that, start coalescing, start bringing it together, and then building up to where we wanted to go. We'll be talking a little bit around what the future holds. Just before...
Oh yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, I was asked to just wrap up, summarize what everybody said, which I'm not going to do, because I'm going to trust that you've heard all the good stuff. And I think you'll be exhausted if I summarize all of this brilliant thinking that happened on the stage. So what my role now is going to be is just to tell you that everyone in this room can grow more, cut costs, and make more money if you put some data, connectivity, and thinking into your existing business. It's as simple as that. Industry 4, Fourth Industrial Revolution is actually the coming together of human processes and technology in a more complex way. But the complexity must lead to simplicity. If it doesn't, you're lost. It's actually all about bringing everything together in a simple way, so that you can serve the customer better, so that you can make more money. The complexity lies in the human process and the collaboration that we're not used to. And that is actually what I'm going to do, is I'm going to challenge this group that we need to get this right for Pretoria and Tshwane. Because what happened with us, I sit at the CSIR. Mark said I live in Cape Town. I don't. I live in Pretoria, but I present the Innovation Summit in Cape Town because it was just too hard to get collaboration going in this city, to be frank. I did it for 6 years in Johannesburg, and it's as hard there. Well, when you land in Cape Town, they ran for 14 years with Silicon Cape, the same as Silicon Valley, where government, private sector, and the academic sector stand together. And that's what we need. We need the enablers, we need the creators and implementers to work together to get a better society output. Great things are happening in your garages, in your kitchens. And then just in one sentence, we are 4 people sitting at the CSIR presenting the biggest innovation summit on the continent of Africa. Our contribution per year in the economy in terms of deal making that happens over the month of the summit, because our electronic platforms open 3 weeks before the summit, where people start making deals, sell to big business buying from small business. We've got more than 3,000 tech entrepreneurs on the platform, is over 1.15 billion rand into the economy in 3 days of deal making. That takes a year of collaboration, building in the background, but a lot of internet, a lot of social media. We've got sellers in Nigeria, we've got sellers all over Africa that I've never met, to mobilize tech entrepreneurs to come to the event. If we can do this from Pretoria, can you imagine what we can do for the city? If we can just start gelling. And I think what we sometimes miss when you're in control of your own business and you're chasing your profit line, you will create the gel, even if you must pay a little bit for that. In society, we fund processes, we fund activities, we fund products, but very seldom the gel. So think about what gel is needed to make this platform work. And I want to say, Mark, great that you started this Industry 4.co.za platform. I think it's absolutely fantastic, and I think everybody should hop on it. Let's start conversations. I'm an industrial psychologist. I'm very comfortable in this world. So if you're not an engineer, I am sure you are more than welcome, because they absolutely need you. I can promise you that. They do need you, because you're the gel that makes this happen. And I think we must open ourselves up. We need the township tech entrepreneur. Out of the 3,000 up tech entrepreneurs, 75% comes from townships. They're brilliant, they kick ass. We should start to embrace them. We should honor them. They must become part of your processes. You must buy from them. You must integrate them. So I'm pleading for diversity in the makeup of this silicon threads that you're going to weave in the city, because without that, you are bound to fail. So that is my 2 cents, and I think every one of you can do this. If we could have done it here with 4 people, you can do it if you sell chicken food, if you sell bananas, if you sell, and I'm sure all of your businesses are far beyond that. If you put some data into that, you put some networking into that, if you put some intelligence into what you do, you can grow, and the world is your oyster, and the continent is your oyster, and you are set for victory. And I hope that helped to just bring it to that level. Yeah, I hope I set the scene for you then to start the conversation.
Right, we're almost there. We're almost going to get to the coffee and the tea and refreshments and the loo break. We just want to finish off Q&A, so if there are any questions or if you maybe have an answer. Thank you very, very much, Audrey. I was just writing feverishly down. I take notes of all the key words. You give so many great ideas on business. This is like too much. So we want to bring it down. She's empowered us as well. It's up to you. You are valuable. Whether you're a single person, SME, a large corporate, you are absolutely, absolutely vital to the bigger picture. So thank you, Audrey, for, hopefully we can get this fire going here in Tshwane. We really, really need to do that. And diversity as well, absolutely crucial. A lot of opportunities waiting for us in places where we would not think they should be. They are there. All right, any questions? Yes, Dave.
It's just more comments. It's quite impressive to see the 50-plus club leading this industry. And I think we need to applaud them.
We respect our elders, we respect them. Simon, Simon, I must just introduce a little bit around Simon. He's from the Uppington area. He's representing Griquas, representing the traditional knowledge. Now, guys, if you do not see business opportunities by engaging with Simon, I don't know. There's amazing knowledge locked up in between his ears, and he's the spear point of a whole lot of interesting projects that we're hoping to engage on around traditional healing, traditional health medicines from the Griquas, the SAN, incredible knowledge that's locked up there or that's there available. Please engage with Simon afterwards. Simon, the floor is yours. But not too controversial, yeah?
No.
Or controversial. We like controversy. Anything you want to say. Thank you.
Mark, I just want to say that technology and science are running too fast for our human minds to conceive. And our bodies cannot cope with that speed. Now we keep on using drugs to keep us awake, to keep us alert, and to make progress. Now, what we need today is what I wanted to ask the panel. Is there any innovation that we can use our herbs that we've got in this country to help our people so that they should be healthier and be more productive? I know what these chemicals are doing to our bodies. And we need something that can help our bodies to fight all these important diseases. That's where I will be playing a part, and I'm more than welcome to join or sit and talk with anyone that can help me lead this process further. Because there is an immense knowledge in the Kalahari, how people's health can be restored. For instance now, I don't want to make a big thing of it. HIV is something that we can say is of the past, but I cannot call that, because the products that I have has healed some people. People that was using injections for sugar diabetes, they have taken their needles and thrown away, and they are living a normal life today. Now these are the things that I would want to discuss. And if anyone is interested, I would gladly work with a person to help South Africa. We can have many companies set up, but if the people are sick, they cannot work, and the company will stand still. That's why I come here, to help the people, to feed their children, and to send their children to school when they are healthy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Simon. As I said, he's got some awesome ideas. I don't want to take his IP. Please go see Simon afterwards. He's got some very interesting projects that I think we can definitely invest in.
Thanks, Mark, Simon. Maybe I can respond from CSIR point of view and from a scientific point of view to your point. We've developed processes and machines to do high throughput science and high throughput testing. And the most prominent one is a machine that we have commercialized in the United States now for cancer testing. And what it does is it allows thousands of simultaneous tests. So you take a sample of a person's cancer, put it onto a plate, and then in microscopic quantities you're able to then run thousands of simultaneous tests of drugs that might help that patient. Okay, so that's what we call high throughput science. And the problem with cancer today is not, for example, that you can't treat it and that many people will recover from having cancer. It's the time it takes to recognize which type of cancer it is and which drug will help. So if you have the methods of high throughput science, you can isolate the cancer and the right drug that will help that patient within a matter of days. Okay? And that's how one believes, and that's what encourages Bill Gates, for example, to make statements that he plans within the next 20 years to eradicate cancer for the human race. Okay? Because one is going to achieve that. Okay? People are confident. People are also confident that you will get rid of AIDS within the next 10 years. Okay, and I think you may have seen the publications recently around the 1990. Okay, identify 90% of the AIDS patients, give them the right medication, okay, and make sure that they take their medication for 90% of the time, and then AIDS will be a thing of the past. So it then boils down to the processes, and that's where digitalization is going to play a huge, huge role. And getting the medication to patients, one of the big drives is pharmacy automation. Because if you need to take your medication on a daily basis, you need to have it first, so you need to get it. So you can imagine coming from a rural area to a clinic, queuing in a queue, sometimes waiting for 2 days before you get your medication, possibly not having the funds to pay for it. So if you automate that, you can get that medication through a robotic system, fully digital, okay, which even takes your vital statistics when you go and fetch your medication, that will improve the situation for many, many patients. So those are the type of things that the fourth industrial revolution can offer your let's say, medicinal technology.
Thank you, Martin. So there we have it. We can combine the meds to keep us healthy with the automated systems, ancient knowledge, modern technologies to get it out to everybody. How cool is that? Who's interested in that business? All right. Any other questions? Petrus.
Is there a better way that we can maybe look at educating people and getting more people involved? Because obviously, I think the first speaker spoke about awareness, but what other channels can we use? There's so much information out there, but yet we're battling to sell these concepts. So just any ideas on that would be great.
I was also thinking about that, and I think one of the problems we face specifically in South Africa is that there's people who leave schools, typically people who will become factory operators, who don't understand the value of data. If you cannot get a person to manually write down numbers because he doesn't understand what a process engineer wants to do, statistical analysis to improve some aspect, that means we still need one phase before we get to the implementation of Industry 4.0. There's like a step 0 of getting people onto the team. And I think the way of getting people to think in those lines is targeting the 10-year-olds, liaising with a national curriculum to make sure these ways of thinking, and also like one of the gentlemen was saying, to teach people not to think in terms of poverty, and to make them understand that improvement isn't necessarily a bad thing for them. It's not taking away something. All of those concepts we have to get into the minds of the youth. And that's already a lot easier than taking people who are 30 or 40 and then trying to change their minds. Was that too much?
Sorry, Maya is a process engineer, she needs data.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I just want to make a comment to that. Data and gathering data and how we do it is going to be disrupted as well. Okay? It's not going to be up to us to gather the data. The AI will gather the data. And I'll give you an example. So we met recently with a person in the United States who's created a program, an app on the iPhone, which can predict if you're manic depressive. That app can predict days in advance whether you're going into a manic or a depressive phase, okay? And you input no data. All you have to do is load the app onto your iPhone, put the iPhone in your pocket. The app does the rest. It looks at where do you go to, what do you eat, when do you sleep, when do you wake up, and out of all of this data gathering, it will predict whether you're manic or depressive. And you're adding no data, okay? Or physically. So we have to also rethink how we are actually going to gather and deal with data and who's allowed to have certain data. And that's going to be key.